Hello, I'm Juliet Mann, and this is the Agenda podcast, CGTN Europe's one-stop shop for smart, in-depth discussion of the issues that really matter in the world today. Esports, once the preserve of a few gamers in their bedrooms, is now watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world each year. It's evolved into a thriving digital entertainment ecosystem. Gameplay is big business. The global market is projected to surge from $2.09 billion in 2024 to about $9.54 billion by 2034. The biggest market? China, where the esports industry generated $3.85 billion in 2024, not including esports merchandise. The esports audience there alone is around 490 million people, and those huge audiences have led to premium sponsorships and global tournaments that fill stadiums. The 2025 Esports World Cup is taking place right now in Saudi Arabia with a record prize pot of $70 million, the largest in the history of esports. Sporting celebrity stardust is also raising this rapidly growing sector's game. Soccer star Cristiano Ronaldo is the 2025 Esports World Cup Global Ambassador. And the market is only going to grow, with Riyadh also looking to host the first Olympic Esports Games, a landmark event both in the world of esports and within the Olympic movement in 2027. Joining me now are Chester King, founder and president of British Esports, Professor Tom Cannon, expert on sports finance and economics at the University of Liverpool, and gamer and teaching fellow at the University of Salford, Jake Trotman. Great to have you all here. Chester, let me start with you, because so far the World Cup of esports has been making the headlines. We've had shocking results, we've had unforgettable moments, and it's drawn audiences from all around the world. But for the uninitiated, can you explain what esports are and why this World Cup is so important for the sector?
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. So the definition of esports is organized competitive video gaming. So this is where you're playing video games always against a human, so not against a computer, human versus human, and it ranges from 1 versus 1 format up to 5 versus 5. And what's exciting about the Esports World Cup is there's kind of acknowledges around 40 different esports that are played globally at different competitions, and the Esports World Cup has about 20 of them for this year's iteration. And the prize pool this year is just over $70 million. So it's a huge event, and it's basically a club tournament, a professional club tournament where they play different types of esports. So it's really exciting. It's the largest of its kind in the world. This is its kind of second iteration, as being called the Esports World Cup. And the prize pool last year was 60 million, and this year is just over $70 million. So it's really exciting. And it's basically for people to show off their talent at the different types of esports.
Jake, how has the rise of esports led to the professionalisation, would you say, of competitive gaming?
Obviously, as we've seen growth in the sector, it's kind of become a lot more undeniable. Its influence on popular culture has grown pretty significantly. What we're seeing now is tournaments getting massive viewership. League of Legends last year, the World Cup, for that, got 7 million peak viewers on its broadcast, which is comparable to a lot of traditional sports. You're seeing massive investment from many different companies, global giants like Samsung and LG getting involved. So what we are seeing is a massive kind of commercialization and push for kind of continued global awareness for esports at the moment.
Tom, let's talk a little bit more about the business of esports and how it's getting so big. I mean, is it technology? Is it finance? Is it host nations, places like Riyadh stepping up?
I think it's a bit of all. I think the truth is what you've seen is a phenomenal growth by individuals committing themselves, partly by the attraction of the funds, but also because basically it's become a very exciting and dynamic activity to engage in. It's a real sport. And of course, you've now got superstars. You've got esportsmen who are millionaires and have made millions out of the game. I'm hoping that Mr. King has made a few millions out of it, but it's basically producing superstars. And as we've seen very recently, the production of superstars actually is one of the things which drives growth not just locally where the superstars are from, but globally. And that's the other thing about this sport. And with great success, it is now global. There's hardly any part of the world where it hasn't drawn in the appeal of individuals, of teams, and even big companies, as Jake was referring to. And basically, I think we are having a situation where people are competing to rule the field, if you can use that term electronically.
Chester, would you agree with that? I mean, esports are big in China and a national obsession in South Korea. Where else are pro e-athletes training hard? I mean, are Western audience playing a little bit of catch-up here?
Yeah, so of the 40 different esports, you've got a bit like traditional sport, you've got some countries that specialize in different sports. So there's a game in China, mobile game that's played by 80 million people in China, but it's not played over in the West. It hasn't kind of transferred. It's a bit like, not everyone plays cricket, not everyone plays baseball. So you are seeing local heroes as well as national heroes. There's a player called Faker out of South Korea who is bigger than Messi, Ronaldo, everyone. He is, as Tom said, he is the biggest superstar of them all. He won that incredible World Championships in London in League of Legends in November at the O2, which was a sellout. So, yeah, we are seeing that across the board. With regard to other countries, you've got titles and fans in South America and Brazil. It's huge. In Peru, they're massive Dota 2 players, which is a specific title. In Poland, CSGO was the game because, again, as Tom said, we had a huge superstar in Poland, and then that creates a role model.
I wonder, when you're competing, when you're taking part, do you know where the person on the other end of the console is coming from?
Of course, but it is very global. When I was an active esports player, I was in teams with people from Brazil, North America, all over the place, really. It is a very kind of global, unifying type of experience. So, there is very few kind of land boundaries. It's not like football, where usually you'll have a UK Premier League team taking on another UK Premier League team, or maybe, someone from Europe, etc. It's not uncommon for, say, a North American team in esports to take on a Chinese team or a Korean team. So it is a very global phenomenon, and we can see that from kind of global viewership being as big as it is, etc.
Tom, let's talk a little bit more detail in terms of revenue streams, which are pretty diverse, because we've got merchandise, we've got live streaming. Where do you see the growth coming from?
I think there are three drivers of the growth. The first one, it is phenomenally accessible. The truth of the matter is there is no physical or gender bias in the game. Obviously, historically, it's been dominated by men because the games that were predominantly engaged in the game. But you are getting more and more young women and not so young women getting involved. So that's the first driver, and that generates revenue. The second thing is that our businesses are recognizing the opportunity. We've already had reference by Jake to some of the IT companies who are getting involved, and that's a very important factor as well. So they're seeing ways of driving growth of their games and the popularity of their games, and that growth can be seen almost immediately when a big new player comes into the sport. And then finally, you have got sponsors coming in now. Somebody who wants to put their name on a team, one of the teams that won last time, basically, they end up getting sponsored, and that sponsorship income generates the willingness to spend more money, because sponsors get involved, not just because they want to get involved in the game and end up doing the situation, which is also very exciting about esports, which is that basically new games are being accepted within the esports environment. And that's phenomenally important, not just to the sponsors, to the IT companies, and to the participants, but to the growth of the sport globally.
Chester, I wonder what you think. Do you think the industry's current size maybe underlines a shift in entertainment consumption patterns worldwide?
So if you take the video games industry as a whole, the rough figure is kind of just under 200 billion, but the esports element is around 1% at the moment, so it's 2 billion. And for some publishers, they're using esports as a marketing activity. For some publishers, they're using it as a way to sort of just engage with a certain demographic, which they're hard to reach. So there is, huge growth at the moment. As Tom said, where we're seeing as the National Federation is huge growth in education and skills, transferable skills. In the UK, I think there's 42 universities now teaching different types of esports courses from 14 universities. We developed a BTEC, a high school qualification, where we've had about 14,000 people study that, and there's HNDs. But what's interesting is we've just done a partnership with the Ministry of Defence to launch a new esports competition around transferable skills for people who haven't even thought about a job in the digital sector who could have been a good gamer. So you're seeing more investment from defence and security industries into esports, into video games, to get those people to come across and, talking about future jobs. So I think we're in a really exciting moment in esports around, you need the flagship Esports World Cups, but actually the industry and people are understanding about the benefits of playing esports and playing games to enhance their recruitment and their hobbies.
I think one of the things that we're coming across when we're doing research into esports is it's seen as a barrier breaker. People come into esports and they feel it breaks barriers in two directions. It breaks barriers for people who are nervous about the technology and use it as a way of getting into the technology, as I think Chester was alluding to then inside the Ministry of Defence. But it's also a barrier in the other direction. It's people who have engaged in esports, seeing that they can compete and learn new skills, new tricks, new tools, and that is a barrier to wider use of their technology. The game technology becomes a gateway to a whole host of other IT, internet, dare I even say AI technologies.
I want to pick up on something that Chester mentioned, university courses that specialise in this. It's a new kind of education, if you like. Jake, that's what you do, isn't it? So talk us through the course. Yeah. How does it work? What are people learning?
Of course. So our offering here at the University of Salford is Higher National Diploma Esports Business Management. So while it is very rooted in the fundamentals of a business degree, and that's the specialism I come from as well as esports, it is all about the practical technologies revolving around the esports industry. We talked with industry partners to say to them, what would you expect from a graduate? What do you need them to be able to do? And so that's things we teach. Things like broadcasting, understanding of game design, for understanding fundamentals for things like coaching in games, etc. All very practical hands-on skills, as well as that theoretical business background to ensure that our students are set up for success. And a lot of other universities are offering very similar things. They might offer even more specialist courses, but I think at the end of the day, everyone working in esports education has the same underlying goal of let's hopefully get our students into the esports industry so they can be the future movers and shakers of it.
Chester, British esports has recently announced plans for a new flagship arena to open next year, I believe. Tell us a little bit more about that and what it means for the future of esports here in the UK and also in the rest of Europe.
Yeah, so we've been looking for about 4 years to find the right venue, and esports is quite specialist. So what we ended up doing actually was buying an old car dealership and converting it. The reason we did that is it's a huge space, wide, with no columns, and it's 8 meters tall. So this will be a performance campus opening at the end of Q1 next year. It's right next to actually a Premier League football team, Sunderland. We've got a national campus up there already where we have classrooms, gaming rooms, gaming houses where people come and train with us, and that's for pro teams and national teams. And we do a lot with, for example, British basketball have a esports team playing a game called NBA 2K, and we host and train them. And then we've had teams like Falcons who are doing very well in the Esports World Cup. They will come and train with us when there's UK talent. So one of the other revenue streams that is improving or increasing is around having physical spaces. So Saudi, Korea and us are the only federations that have physical bases. And Saudi is the only one really incomparable to us. We have a relationship with them about benchmarking, best practice, safeguarding, etc. So our new arena will be opening, as I say, the end of Q1. It's very exciting. It's got a 17 meter by 3 meter screen. We'll be doing not only training there for people, but there'll also be a grassroots program. We do a lot with the communities already around interaction between bizarrely police who can't no longer play football on the street, the bobby on the street, but they're actually playing video games with the local community kids just to understand and build a relationship. But we'll also be doing things like watch parties. So when these great events happen around the world, you actually, a bit like people watching the Lionesses from different venues in the UK, you can actually go and watch different events. And the other thing that's exciting, and this is where the crossover between sport and esports is getting closer, is, every F1 team has an esports team. Every Premier League team has an esports team. So in America, there's a game called Madden, which is an NFL game. And we'll be able to do a watch party of the Super Bowl, and then people will be able to play the video game competition within the same arena. So there's a few venues in the UK that do that already, but we'll be doing that on a bigger scale. And then I think once we get going, other countries, other national federations will be doing that investment as well.
In terms of the infrastructure and investment into infrastructure, Tom, where do you see more of that happening, and who's got the deep pockets to make those investments?
Well, it's quite interesting drawing that point that Chester was making a moment ago, because I was recently interviewing a group of guys who were desperately keen skateboarders, but also desperately keen e-sporters. And what they were crying for was then venues like has been developed in skateboarding for esports. And so what's being proposed is going to be absolutely vital to the next stage of growth. And I can see it moving from semi-permanent venues to permanent venues. I think you're going to see the kind, and if it works next to Sunderland, I can see it occurring. For example, if you take Manchester, where you've got the Etihad Stadium, and there's a venue, there's an environment there where an esports venue could be developed. The local authority can see the opportunities there, not just for esports. And I can see clubs like Manchester City seeing the opportunity. And then you can get a lot of the crossover, in a sense, because stars in soccer, actually, a lot of them are actually esporters as well. Last time I was over at the Etihad, I spoke to at least 3 of the younger players, not first teamers, I admit, they're a bit less accessible, and all 3 of them were keen esporters. And that would make logically for them, and I'm sure that'll happen at Sunderland, and it'll happen much more widely. Physical facilities, local authorities will see the opportunity, not only in terms of physical redevelopment, but also in terms of educational development, and also in terms of logistics developments.
We've been talking a little bit about celebrity esports athletes, and we are seeing real star power, aren't we, with the World Cup, with Cristiano Ronaldo as the global esports ambassador. Jake, when do you think that esports athletes will become household names?
We're really on the precipice of it. I think that, the next couple of years, esports athletes are going to become household names globally. They already are locally. We talked briefly about Faker before. It's hard to understate how important Faker is to the nation of South Korea. He's kind of as deified as someone like Lionel Messi is to Argentina. 5-time world champion, Esports World Cup winner. He recently announced that he was re-signing with his team T1 until 2029, and it was all over Korean Twitter. Okay, it was basically celebrations in the streets, pretty much, because it's an iconic partnership. Faker and T1 is as iconic as, say, Max Verstappen and Red Bull, or Lionel Messi and Real Madrid. It's very important, and we've seen coverage of esports athletes before. We've seen a few years ago when it was the first Fortnite World Cup, Jaden Ashman, who was 15 at the time, got nationwide coverage in the UK because he was a 15-year-old London lad who came second in the world. So we are getting very close, and I think once we have those globally recognised esports names, it's going to bring in big attention to esports. A lot like how we see it in sports. When you see a dominant run of an athlete, it brings engagement, it brings viewership. Things like Michael Jordan for the NBA, or Lewis Hamilton over here for the F1. It drives that engagement, and that's really going to come very soon, I think.
All the names you've mentioned so far are men's names. I mean, Chester, let's talk about esports and how inclusive it really is, because the stereotypical image is, of course, of young men playing these games. But to make the big money, esports is going to need to appeal to all ages and to women too, right?
Yeah, so it's something, as Tom said at the beginning, it's something that everyone acknowledges it has happened. You know, some of the video games at the beginning were kind of more male focused. What the industry has done is improve that. There's some great games like Overwatch and Valorant, which are more female focused. There's some role models within the game. So we started out in 2016 as a federation, and we started running a schools competition. And we started off with 4 schools. We now have 700 schools participating every week, playing 5 different titles. And we were very keen to promote female participation. And in 22, we ran the Commonwealth Esports Championships, in Birmingham, which is in parallel to the Commonwealth Games. The announcement at the time had 1 billion views. It was the first proper sporting tournament which had esports parallel to it, albeit not a full medal event. And that event, we had female and male in mirroring what you happen in traditional sport. It is incredibly important, and there are some people who are really trying to drive that. There is a debate about should the tournaments be open so that anyone of any gender can participate, or is it best to split it and help promote that? So in the UK, you've got 2 university leagues, the NSC and the Newell, and I know that they do split that up as well, and we try and promote that. So I think, again, you need role models. There are some great female talent on some of the single title games, like some of the fighter games and the football games. And I know we work with we're a member of the Global Esports Federation, and they definitely do that and promote that. So it takes time. I know in the UK more men play esports, more women play video games on the stats, but games of skill versus games of chance. But I think, as Jake was saying, with Wolfies, who won, in 2019, he came second in the duos. He won $1 million, and then he bought this house from mum. He was a great role model because he was an A student. He was a really smart boy. What we need is a couple of women to do as well as that, and then start the dialogue. I'd love to know if any of the Lionesses play football. I know a lot of the sports people do, like Orlando Norris and a lot of the football players, as Tom said, and the cricket players, most professional athletes. I don't know yet enough female professional sports people, traditional sports people that play video games, but I think that would be a great first step into that kind of direction.
Jake, is it a barrier that the image of esports is sitting in a chair behind a console? It doesn't sound particularly physically taxing, although it might be mentally draining. How much of a barrier is that, do you think?
I think it's very much a barrier. When I started getting involved with esports, I was 14 years old. This is 10 years ago. It wasn't as culturally accepted then as it is now. My family was very supportive, but I had, lots of people very opposed to what I was doing. I got involved with esports because of my disability. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I was a rugby player as a child, couldn't continue on with that. So I moved into esports as my outlet for competition. But you are right, it is very mentally taxing. People kind of make the assumption that you're in a seat, you're in the comfort of your own home often, what's so hard about it? But when you're playing with very real stakes on the line, nobody really tends to question a footballer who misses a penalty in a cup final game. Whereas if you miss a major opportunity in esports, that is your livelihood. You are experiencing that kind of similar kind of grief in a sense. So, I think that as time moves on, as people my age, I got into video games because of my sister and my dad. My dad had played video games from being a child himself. So as we kind of move forward generationally, it will become a lot more culturally acceptable. And I think as understanding of mental health continues to improve, we are going to see a lot more sympathy for esports athletes when they have their lowest lows, and even more celebration when they have their highest highs.
So from a pro team point of view, and I was involved with 2 pro teams, we had a nutritionist, we had a fitness coach. So not that sometimes this messaging goes down well with parents, but for a lot of kids who understand it, to be a better gamer, you need to be physically fit, right? So I would say that those that are serious about gaming actually know that you don't want to be in front of your screen all the time, that you need to improve your core. And actually, there's some really great examples of that around the world. And some of the best gamers, including Faker and these role models, talk about how important physical health is in that world. And I think, as I say, once we become a member of Team GB and we go to the Olympic Esports Games, you're going to get performance coaches, Sport UK, and every country in China, everywhere, they're going to be focusing on what can add that edge by being physically fitter will help in your mental preparation.
So Tom, we've talked about esports being one of the newest entrants to the Olympic movement. What's that going to mean for the finance of esports?
There's all kinds of other ways of investment. It's quite interesting that looking at Jake, he's obviously sitting in a dedicated esport type of facility. Now, I was in a big department store this weekend, and I was preparation for this, and I saw how many in the furniture department actually had seats available for people who were game players. And the other thing that struck me when we talked about it today, at least half the people sitting at consoles in this big department store in designer seats were young women. And that, I think, is part of the other element that's going to make esports and basically the confidence to participate grow exponentially.
Chester, where do you see esports heading in the future? Is it going to be up there with football, with basketball, with cricket and the like?
Yeah, I think what the advantage of esports is how inclusive and diverse it is, and you can have a team of people of disabilities, men, women playing together. And I think this is what's been so rewarding for us and what we've been doing on our school level and university level across the board. So I think participation of the activity, not everyone can physically or emotionally play sport, but a lot more people can play the video game. And there's a great stat in America that 20% of girls that play soccer did so because they played the video game first. They understand the rules. They understood about the position rules. So I think obviously it's mainstream in our world already, but I think you'll have a generation who'll get it. My son was born in the year 2000, and I got into esports because I was so fascinated at what an incredible activity it was and how beneficial it was. And as Jake talks about mental health, during COVID, we ran, our after school, we're the only after school club activity that went throughout the whole of COVID because it's so accessible. So for me, the future of esports is just growing and growing. It become more mainstream. And obviously, there is such a choice of these different things. And then you've got heroes where they'll get the 100 million, but there's also national heroes who will win a gold medal. And that to me is fantastic about it. And that's what's so fantastic about sport. You've got these different choices. So it'll just be part of mainstream. It won't be, I remember when digital marketing came out and everyone says, oh, what type of marketer are you? A digital marketer or marketing? It's like, well, it's all marketing now. And I think esports will be just under the sport umbrella.
Chester King, Tom Cannon, Jake Trotman, thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more agenda content on CGTN Europe's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube channels. Until next time, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.